Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Whispering Gentleman. So flick off the lights, sit down in your comfortable chair, and grab a glass of your favorite drink as we dive on in. The Monster Under the Bed, Part 2, by Corpse Child. I didn't hear anything strange, and sleep was no problem for me that night, as well as the next few nights for maybe about another 2.5 or 3 weeks. Because of this, I actually did start to think the whole thing was in my head. Just too many nights spent watching those classic monster movies, right? Well, at least until that Thursday night, almost a month later, when, you guessed it, I heard the noises again. The pounding was frantic, even more so than last time. It sounded like someone was knocking on the door in distress, the way you see in the movies when someone's trying to get inside of somewhere to hide from some maniac or something. Once again, I was wide-eyed and felt chills prickling down my spine with every hammering blow from under me. This did make me notice one thing though. Last time, the pounding was soft yet close by, and I could feel it through the mattress. Now, however, the noises were louder, but seemingly further away, and I couldn't feel them. I guess noticing this, rather than immediately run like last time, I actually had the balls to climb down with a flashlight and look around under my bed. I jumped though, when another series of blows coming from under the floorboards actually caused the wood flooring to start poking upwards.
It's gonna come through the floor.
That was when my courage abandoned me, and it was back to the bathtub again. That night, I didn't sleep at all. And when Aunt Mabel questioned me about it, I told her that it happened again, that the monster was trying to get me again. Just like last time, she assured me that it would be dealt with for good this time, to quote her, and to get ready for school. School itself was even more of a drag than last time, and I was even called to the principal's office after getting caught falling asleep in class. They tried questioning me as to why I felt it was okay to fall asleep in class, to which I just gave them the same lame excuse I did for Wendy. In the end, I was sentenced to ISS for the rest of the day, which meant a phone call to my Aunt Mabel, and I had to take a note home for her to sign. Great. Not only did I lose sleep again, but now I get to start my weekend off grounded. At least, that's what I expected to happen. Shockingly though, when she picked me up, she wasn't mad or anything. In fact, I think she may have expected this somehow. I could tell by the way she just nodded and replied, "I see," to everything my principal was saying that she could have cared less about this mishap. "Well, sir," she told him with resounding confidence, "I assure you this won't happen again." With this, we left and headed home.
I'm sorry, Aunt Mabel,
I said nervously, still expecting her to lose whatever anger she was keeping contained in the principal's office. Instead, she just smiled and looked in the rearview mirror at me. "Honey, you're fine. Trust me, you shouldn't have any more problems like this. Auntie Mabel has it all taken care of." Despite the fact that I should have been relieved that I apparently wasn't in trouble, I instead felt nervous. Something about the way she was saying this actually frightened me that much more than if she had just screamed at me. I'd at least seen that coming by now, but now I didn't know what to expect. What was she keeping from me? Better yet, why? When we got home, she told me to close my eyes, claiming that she had a surprise gift for me. I held my eyes shut as tight as I could, still feeling more than a little anxious as she led me to my room, and open. My eyes almost shot bullets from my head when I opened my eyes to see a flat-screen TV sitting on top of my dresser with a Xbox off to the right. Ta-da! What do you think? Her face was beaming with the biggest, warmest smile I'd ever seen. My heart was skipping beats like crazy, and I thought my head would explode from sheer ecstasy.
Holy crap!
She giggled before hugging me close to her and planting a firm kiss on the top of my head. She then held up a headset and told me that now I could be like the gamers I would see on YouTube. I rushed over and seized her in the biggest bear hug I was capable of.
You're the best, Mom.
What? She asked, shocked. I pulled away to see that she had a shocked expression on her face. What did you just say?
You're the best?
No. I mean, after that. You called me Mom? I sensed something in her voice, a sort of excitement, a sense almost of triumph. Mom is okay. You can call me that as much as you like, sweetheart. I just stood there, wrapped in her arms, unsure of what to say or do. I mean, it'd been twice now and I've been kept awake from a monster under my bed. Then I was given detention, yet now, here I was, standing locked in my aunt's arms, being rewarded with a brand new TV. She finally broke away and told me that she'd be going out for most of the evening and that she'd leave some money for the pizza on the counter. Have fun, she said cheerfully, winking as she turned to leave. I love you. For a moment, I was still in shock. It all felt like some surreal dream, partly though I was still skeptical about Aunt Mabel's behavior. The way she lit up when I called her Mom. Okay, I get it. She raised me for most of my life by that point, and she did everything she could to make sure my needs and most of my wants were taken care of. Like I said before, she may as damn well have been my biological mother. Still, though, the way she got so excited when I slipped it out on pure accident was just weird. It seemed almost psychotic. Then, on top of that, there was the question of what she wasn't telling me about the noises from under my bed. I didn't feel like investigating the rabbit hole any deeper though, and I turned on my brand new Xbox, finding that it had Halo 3 already in it. It was about 9:30 or 10 o'clock that night and I started getting hungry.
Damn.
I whispered under my breath. I lost myself so much in the game that I didn't realize how late it had gotten, and the only place that they delivered that late was the Domino's on the other side of town. This meant it was going to be about half an hour before they'd get here, and I was pretty hungry. After placing the order, I decided to raid the pantry for snacks to hold me over until the pizza arrived. It was while doing this that I started hearing the shrieking noises from under me. It was soft at first, but steadily increased to a louder and louder pitch. I heard it start to trail away from the area below the pantry and heading towards the room next door. I followed it into my room until I heard a resounding thud from the area directly under my bed. A series of monkey-like shrieks then erupted from the floor, followed by a series of blows to the floorboards. I saw them again to poke outwards again. Soon, I actually saw the wood start to splinter outwards, and I could hear sounds clearly now. The best way I could describe the shrieks was like a sort of wheezing, raspy outcry, like whatever it was had problems breathing properly and was at the same time being strangled. Another frantic series of blows sent the floorboards further and further outward. I was frozen, despite my brain shrieking like how the monster was for my legs to haul ass. They were stiff as boards. It was when the pounding finally stopped and I saw a hand slither out from under the bed that my legs finally broke from their entropy, and I bolted to the living room for the phone. Immediately, I started jabbing the buttons, dialing Aunt Mabel's number.
Come on. Please, pick up.
No luck. I must have tried her number at least 5 times, all straight to voicemail. Eventually, I could hear the sounds of scratching, as well as something dragging on the floor behind me. When I made the mistake of turning around to look, my blood instantly froze solid. Coming out of the hallway was a pinkish red, gnarled, and deformed-looking hand with its yellow nails digging into the floorboards. Another one soon followed, and I could hear the thing's strained breathing get closer. Just before the monster could reveal its face, I turned and I bolted for the bathroom in what felt like one fluid motion, and I slammed and locked the door behind me and all but threw myself into the bathtub. Phone still in hand, I started dialing 911. 911? What is the nature of your emergency? I started stammering.
There's someone in my house after me.
My mind was cycling in a frenzied vortex. I'm sorry? You said there's someone in your house? I heard the breathing approaching the door to the bathroom.
Yes, someone's in my house after me.
I let out a scream when I heard it banging on the door. Sir? Are you still there? Are you alright? What happened?
It's at the door.
I heard it pound harder and harder on the door. I was starting to feel myself slipping further and further into hysterics with each blow that rocked the bathroom door. Alright, calm down. Can you tell me your name and address?
Timothy Barnes. I'm in my house, 1376 Watercrest Drive. I'm in the bathroom, and they're about to break down the door. Please hurry.
Alright, Timothy. I want you to stay where you are, and... She was cut off when another thud from the other side, this one sounded like someone was attempting to batter it with their body, caused me to fling the phone across the room in a panic. When I tried to grab it again, I retracted when I saw the door start pushing outwards. From the other side, the monster let out another of its deranged cries as it continued to batter the door open. My entire body seized up, and I think my heart even stopped for an instant. This was it. I was done for. There was nowhere to run, and even if help was on its way, I knew by the time they got there, it'd be far too late. I could feel tears stinging my eyes, and the door was bashed further and further out until finally flying open. And there, in the doorway, the monster stood, bracing itself against the frame, covered in what looked like blood. It was nude, and its skin, or rather what seemed to remain of it, was a bright pink and looked like raw hamburger meat. I saw that it was blind in its left eye, looking like a white bulging sphere, and the upper lid on the other eye drooped limply, almost covering it entirely. Long, thin black strands of hair seemed to drape over the left side of its head, with the right side being completely bare, exposing its scarred, tattered lips on the right side of its face. It felt like time had stopped, and the two of us seemed frozen, deadlocked into a staring contest. Tears were pouring from my eyes, yet my tongue was frozen in my mouth, and I couldn't even scream. The monster took a slow, staggered step towards me. I heard it groan weakly as it inched drunkenly towards me. I cringed and closed my eyes. Timmy. Hearing this, I opened my eyes again. The monster was now on top of me, leering down at me.
What do you want?
I squeaked pitifully. It continued staring at me, studying me. Timmy. It repeated this time with some sort of emphasis. I saw in its one good eye actually widen a bit when it said it this time, like it somehow recognized me. Noticing this, confusion instantly burrowed itself through a torrential sea of panic and rushed to the forefront of my mind. How did this thing know my name? What even was this thing? I cringed again when I saw its hand stretched downward to me. I felt its hand gently stroke my right cheek. Timmy. Its voice seemed cracked, on the verge of tears. That's when a new feeling was thrown into my panicked mind. Familiarity. Though I couldn't yet put my finger on it. What are you?
What?
I asked, now more bewildered than frightened. What was it trying to say? Mama? Was it trying to say mama? What was that supposed to mean? Its eye widened, and I saw a tear travel from it. Timmy. That was when it hit me. All at once, the memory of that day at the hospital, all those years ago, coming racing back to me. My heart started racing again. No, this can't be.
Mum? Mummy?
I reached out to touch the gruesomely scarred, mangled face. It was true. There was no denying it. This wasn't some inhuman creature. This thing, the monster that had been tormenting me all night, was my mother. She was alive. But how? Where had she been? And why didn't she try to see me? All of these were dwarfed, however, when another, far more pressing question. How long had she been here? Under my bed? Then I remembered all the long nights Aunt Mabel spent out and about before all this started. This led me to start thinking about all of her odd behaviors, particularly the whole call me mom thing, before finally settling upon a damning conclusion. Did Aunt Mabel know about this? Was this what she had been hiding from me this whole time? I was broken from my thoughts when suddenly I heard an enraged shriek come from behind my mother, followed by the sound of metal impacting on the back of her skull. Instantly, her body went limp, and she fell face first into the bathtub right next to me. Blood immediately started to pool around her head, and I looked at the doorway to see Aunt Mabel tightly clutching a pipe wrench. She was breathing heavily, covered in cuts and bruises, and her hair was all messy. Her eyes were wide open and delirious with rage. "He's my boy," she declared with short breath. "Do you hear me, bitch?" The body of my mother was convulsing violently. Aunt Mabel raised the wrench high again before proceeding to drive it again and again into the back of her head. "He's mine, just like his father was mine, you fucking sleazebag whore." Every syllable of her venomous words corresponded almost perfectly with each whack of the wrench on the back of my mother's head. Finally, her body stopped twitching, becoming fully relaxed, lifeless. Regardless of this, Aunt Mabel continued stoving in the back of my mother's skull with a wrench, howling like an uncaged gorilla until I grabbed her arm and cried out.
"Stop! What are you doing? You're gonna kill her!"
She looked at me for a second, examining with her bulging, crazed eyes. Then I felt her arm relax, her animalistic stare melting away back to a gentle, heartwarming smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said in that same gentle voice that now made her sound far more deranged than my mother's monkey-like shrieking. "I told you I'd handle it for good, didn't I? It's all right. Everything's going to be all right." She then pulled me in for a hug and softly cooed, kissing me on top of my head. "Be a good boy and go back to your room. Play your game for a little while and let me finish up in here, okay? This can be our little secret." I shoved her away.
"Get away from me! You're a monster!"
I watched her smile very slowly dissolve away, melting into a confused, sullen look. Monster?" she murmured. I could hear her voice starting to break, her lips starting to twitch and glisten with tears. Monster? Her whole body began shaking violently now. The knuckles on her hand that held the wrench whitened as it shook more violently than the rest of her. "Monster!" She took a disjointed step towards me, still shaking worse than an alarm clock. You call me a monster. I am the one that raised you. I took care of you. I am the one that made you happy. I gave you a life. I am your mother, not this slut. You're my boy. You were always supposed to be my boy. I had backpedaled out of the bathroom as she slowly continued forward, her face twisted into a smile again. This wasn't her warm, loving smile, though. This was a psychotic parody of it with wide, twitching, bulging eyes and pulping grin stretching across the length of her face. "Come here. Give Mama a kiss." I turned and I ran for the front door. I only made it to the center of the living room, however, before Aunt Mabel had me tied in her arms. "You're my boy. Mine. That bitch should have burned in hell with the hospital. I should have always been your mother. She took him away from me. She won't take you. No one can have you. Only I can have you." My struggling was pitiful in her iron grip. She had one arm around my throat, with the other restraining one of my arms. The room started to blur, and I started wheezing, feeling the air forced from my lungs. "Shh. Just take a little nap, my sweet little Timmy." My muscles soon going limp. Darkness crept upon the corners of my vision, eventually taking over. I faintly heard Aunt Mabel's voice start singing. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Auntie Mabel's gonna buy you an ice cream today." Before I could black out completely, the next thing I heard was the crash at the front door being kicked open and a deep voice shouting, "Freeze!" I felt a small bit of air rush back into me as her arm just slightly released its crushing hold on my throat. "Ma'am, drop the weapon and let the boy go. He's mine," I heard her declare with that deranged, psychotic voice. My vision was still blurred, but I saw that looked to be a shape of a police officer standing in front of us, aiming his gun in our direction. "He's my boy. You won't take him away from me." "Ma'am, it's over. Drop your weapon, let him go, and put your hands behind your head." I felt her start to pull me backwards. "He's my boy. No one's taking him away from me." Almost without thinking, I slipped my chin down into the crook of her arm and bit down as hard as I could. She shrieked in pain and retracted, causing her to drop the hammer and allowing me to throw myself away from her and towards the officer. I saw the officer rush to detain her. "No!" she howled, writhing in the officer's arms as she forced her to the ground. "You can't take him from me. He's my boy. My Timmy." Outside, 3 more cruisers poured in, and I ran out to them. I started blabbering frantically to them, trying to tell them what was going on.
"Inside! He's got her! She's tried to get me!"
I could barely keep up with what I was saying myself. One of the officers, in a familiar voice, told me to calm down, take a deep breath, and speak clearly. When I looked to see who it was, I had a full-on meltdown. It was Officer Harriet. Officer Harriet, who'd been there for me years before and was here again now. A superhero. My superhero. Just like Superman or Batman. She smiled and wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "Shh. It's okay, Timothy. Everything's going to be okay." From behind me, I could hear Aunt Mabel screaming at the top of her lungs as she was dragged, kicking, and struggling out of the house. By now, her screaming had devolved into insane babbling, completely incomprehensible. They were barely able to force her into the car. One last time, mine and Aunt Mabel's eyes met. Her eyes wide and crazed, and her mouth was wide open like she was howling at me, like an animal, like a monster. Eventually, the ambulance arrived. After they checked me out, ruling that I was fine outside of a few nasty bruises, I told them that my mother was in the bathtub, hurt. I saw them bring a gurney into the house, causing me to remember that day years back when I watched them wheel my father's body away. I had to turn away. I couldn't watch my mother get wheeled out the same way. And that night, Officer Harriet took me home with her. The next morning, she broke the news to me that my mother didn't make it through the night at the hospital. I was told that her last words were, "My Timmy." Aunt Mabel's trial was a month later, where she admitted to both my mother's kidnapping, as well as the arson attack on the hospital. I remember how her face looked when she testified to this, the complete lack of remorse, or of any human emotion for that matter. It's a face that I still see at night when I can't sleep. In the end, she was declared guilty and given 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. That was the last time I'd ever see Aunt Mabel. Not long after that, Officer Harriet began the process to legally adopt me. She told me in the days leading up to the trial that she'd been wanting to have a little boy, a sweet little boy like you. It took almost a year, but it finally happened. I was adopted by her, my superhero. Ever since that night, though, I never got over my fear of what was under my bed. This was very problematic at first because it made me afraid to sleep in my own bed. I wasn't sleeping properly, which of course meant I was doing horribly in school. The only way I was comfortably sleeping was beside Officer Harriet in her bed. Even though she wouldn't say it to me, I knew it was starting to weigh her down too. Finally, we were able to plug me in with a trauma counselor, who I still see to this day, 15 years later. He's helped me a lot through the years, more than I could thank him for. Eventually, I was able to get through school and did a year at college, where I met my beautiful wife, Rachel. She's been with me for 2 years now, through both good and bad times. We've talked about having children, but I always told her that I wasn't sure if that was a good idea. I fear that something would happen to them just like it did with me, that they'd learn the truth about monsters under the bed. She's always been so understanding about it before, but lately she seemed more and more distant towards me, and I'm starting to worry that her patience is running out. That's when my therapist told me to write all this out. Get it all out in the open. I don't know if it'll work in the end or not, but for what it's worth, I do feel confident that sharing this may at least help others. Maybe through this, I can spread the truth. Monsters walk this earth. They might not be the beast or the creature you see on TV or in a comic book, but they are real. All of them. They can take many forms or hide in many places, even under your bed. But even those aren't the worst. No. The worst monster, the scariest monster, is the one that tells you they love you. If you like this story, be sure to check out more of these stories by Corpse Child linked in the description below. As always, sleep tight and stay terrified.